Alrighty, chat. Let's get started. How's everybody doing today? Welcome everyone. Sorry for being late. We're still, I'm still trying to kind of catch up. I've started working a little bit. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. Just a reminder, everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So welcome everyone to another stream. Hope y'all are doing well today. Happy Friday. Just a couple of quick updates on our end. I'm feeling better. For those of you who don't know, I caught the Rona. Probably we went on vacation and we're hiking in the wilderness for 10 days, but on the flight back, chances are I was sitting next to or near people who weren't necessarily masked appropriately and who probably had COVID. So I got coronavirus, so apologies. We've been out for the last 2 weeks, not really able to stream and stuff like that. I got it, my kids got it, my wife got it, so we're all quarantined and, trying to take care of 2 kids makes it hard to work when you're feeling bad yourself. But overall, thankfully, I'm lucky. I think my family is lucky. We have, for the most part, gotten through it without too much trouble. I think, I strongly urge everyone to protect yourselves, get vaccinated, wear masks if y'all are in a situation where, things are scary, if the transmission rates are high. I think COVID, the really scary thing about COVID, I don't think a lot of people know this, but I saw one statistic. Let me just make sure this number is right. So the thing that scares me a lot about COVID is that there are a lot of lingering effects, and it seems like vaccines, even if you get a breakthrough case of COVID, the cases are milder. I didn't need to go to the hospital or anything. My O2 levels were rock solid 99% the whole time, which is fantastic. That's what's usually scary. But I think COVID affects a lot of different parts of your body. And I remember seeing, so it can cause cognitive problems. It can cause erectile dysfunction. I think something like 35% of men who contract COVID will experience some kind of erectile dysfunction. I'm not sure. I'm trying to find a good reference for that statistic. I saw that somewhere, but I can't find the paper. So let me see if I can, hold on, let me fire off a quick message. See if we can find that actual statistic. So, the main point being that, a lot of people will have impressions about how bad COVID is, whether it's bad, whether it's not bad. I think the really scary thing about the virus is that it's highly infectious, and it's highly infectious, and it affects your entire body. So people will get cognitive problems, they'll get cardiac problems. Oh, here we go. And things like that. I did have a vaccine. So I was fully vaccinated. My wife was fully vaccinated. So I think that's part of the reason why 2 weeks in, instead of being on a ventilator in the ICU, I'm still streaming. Not at 100%, but still able to do some work. So, for everyone who sent us well wishes and have been supportive of us and things like that, I really, really appreciate it. I mentioned on Wednesday that it's nice to be loved and be appreciated. And I'm really lucky and privileged to have the positive sentiment of a lot of people. So I'm grateful for that. And right back at you, chat. Couple of other things. So our guide, Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health, launched on Wednesday. As I understand, most people seem to like it, and it seems to be helping people, which is fantastic. We're really, really happy to hear that. That's why we made it. It took a lot of energy, a lot of effort. And I think there's going to be a watch party at 2 p.m. on the Discord. So if you guys have the guide and y'all want to kind of go through it together, we encourage all kinds of discussion about it. Remember that the guide is it's not necessarily like my take on truth, right? So that the guide is really designed to offer y'all all the different perspectives that I consider when I'm thinking about someone. So when someone comes into my office with depression, I'll think about, okay, is this a clinical illness? Is this not a clinical illness? What are the different perspectives that people may appreciate? I don't think everything in the guide is going to be for all people, right? So it's the point of the guide is to offer different perspectives. And so as I've studied human beings now for, the better part of 2 decades, I've learned a lot of different perspectives. And the guide is sort of me sharing some of the ones that I found to be useful. Every person is different. Some people are going to be more scientifically oriented. Some people are going to be more spiritually oriented. Some people are going to be, really interested in meditation. Some people are going to be really interested in things like herbs. Some people are going to be, interested in Ayurveda. Other people will be more interested in like clinical definitions. Some people will be like into medication. Some people won't be into medications. And so that's totally fine. I'm not saying that y'all have to do any particular thing. In fact, it's not, the guide really is intended to educate. So as a clinician, as a psychiatrist, as someone who helps people kind of medically, spiritually, whatever, I try to just share my perspectives or different perspectives that I've learned. They're not necessarily even mine. And so the goal is to educate y'all, right? So you can learn something about depression, anxiety, because in my experience, the best outcomes I've had with patients come from patients who are like well-educated. As a doctor, when I work with someone, it's like really nice to have someone who's like, knows things themselves. Like some doctors will sort of dislike that when patients come in and have opinions. They come in and they say, hey, I don't want medication. And you're the doctor, you're like, oh, like, well, you should take it. Well, no, I mean, they may have good reasons for not wanting medication, and having educated patients, I think, is always a good thing. So the goal of the guides is to teach you guys some of that stuff. So check it out. In terms of feedback and stuff, if you guys run into problems, hopefully there's like a way to submit bugs and things like that. We also have gotten good feedback already about, some things that the guides have not covered, which is a lot. Because at the end of the day, we could only film so much, write so much, some things had to be cut and things like that. We're already thinking about, what's coming next. And ultimately, whether we continue to do that or not really depends on how useful it is to y'all. So if we get a bunch of people say, hey, this was really, really, really helpful, and what we would really love is like this, then, it'll make it easier for us to move in that direction. Couple other things. I know our coaching program has actually been full for the last few months, basically. New spots and stuff open up every single day as clients kind of wrap up. But we're going to have, we're training a new batch of coaches. They're fantastic. I really enjoy working with them. Really thoughtful, really dedicated. It's a lot of fun to, watch them learn how to be effective coaches. It's fun to watch them not be effective coaches. And so we're in that training portion. They're all doing really, really well. And I'm really optimistic. So we're going to have a bunch of spots opening up in September. So if people have been waiting, I think there are several hundred people, I think almost 1,000 people right now on the coaching waiting list. So we apologize for, not being able to help y'all yet. And we will have a bunch of spots opening up in September. Okay. How to not be an effective coach. So because like they're new, right? So like they're learning things. So I think one of the simplest examples is sometimes like a coach has an instinct and then they don't trust it because that's not what we've taught them to do. And so that's one of the things that you have to learn, the balance between sort of like following kind of like the script and learning to trust your instincts. It's all very developmentally appropriate stuff. It's been great. Yeah, so trust the gut, but not always, right? Because the gut may give you a hypothesis, but the hypothesis could be wrong. So you think you will ever expand to Canada for coaching? I think we did. I think so. This new batch of coaches, I think, is from a lot of different countries. And I think we have Canadian coaches, and we certainly have Canadian clients. I'm pretty sure we have Canadian coaches and clients, like 99% sure. My gut tells me to eat junk food. Should I listen to it? Yeah, that's a good question, right? So that's the problem with the gut. So that's what I mean when I say, like, they're developmentally appropriate, because it's about finding the balance between trusting your gut. It's about using your gut not to form conclusions, but to form hypotheses, right? And then what we're training these folks to do is follow their gut in terms of presenting a hypothesis, but ultimately work with your client. Don't assume that you know what's going on with them, but like put it out there for them to kind of think about and consider. So it's all good stuff. I think actually teaching is one of my favorite things to do. It's part of the reason I actually enjoy streaming and stuff too, because I really enjoy teaching and stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun to work with them. They're great. So when someone's saying, guys, just trust Dr. K, I don't know if that's actually a good idea, right? So I would say that y'all should use Dr. K in this stream as a source of hypothesis generation. So our goal, I'm not the arbiter of truth, but what I can offer y'all is perspectives for y'all to think about. And the yogic perspective is, oddly enough, it's good to have faith in particular people like teachers, but ultimately the conclusions are for you, because what I talk about may apply to 99% of people, but if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. So trusting in that conclusion may not be appropriate. What we really advocate for, and what I think it works really, really well, is for you to like understand yourself first, right? Understand, how am I different? What are the stats on my character sheet? Because there are going to be 1,000 people out there, myself included, who will give you 1,000 different solutions. They'll say, oh, like, this is the solution to procrastination. This is the solution to this. This is the solution to this. Just do this. Just do that. Just study. And ultimately, what I've found is that when you understand yourself better, you will be able to better solve your problems. Because if an external solution that one person could come up with actually worked, then like the problem would no longer exist. If any of these blog posts about procrastination was the final answer on procrastination, no one would be procrastinating anymore, right? So a year ago or over a year ago, we did this webinar about the 3 types of procrastination. I think that's a great example of like procrastination is not a monolithic thing, and problems that we face are not monolithic. So it's good to consider a lot of different perspectives to, educate yourself, and ultimately you should be the one who decides what works and what doesn't. All right? Yeah. Lol, just do it. What's the issue? Lol. Yeah. So I think we've got a good, let's hop into subreddit review. Okay. So today what we're going to be doing is answering questions. So we've had a lot of good questions. Sorry, I've been out for a couple of weeks. So I think we're going to try to get to folks' questions from the subreddit. So let's do this. Okay. And I need to zoom in, way in, right? Can you all read that now? Okay. So how to find enjoyment in the process. I always, as Dr. K puts it, run out of mana. In school, I'll have a 4.0 for the first 2 months of the semester and then hit a brick wall and just break down. I'll get a job or work on a project for about a month of pushing myself to try hard and do my best every day. But eventually, after about 2 weeks or a month, I just break down. The cycle just keeps repeating itself. I get motivated, push myself to do something most of the time, even doing it and then just feeling tired and sad and empty and quit. How do I break this cycle? How do I find enjoyment in the process itself? I can't seem to find any wants or motivations. I'm 25 and currently leeching off my parents. My days aren't bad, but I know this lifestyle isn't sustainable and want to support myself, but I just keep hitting brick walls. I just don't see myself or want to, for that matter, keep pushing myself hard every day to just do it. And that doesn't work for me. I feel as though I need to find it enjoyable. If it's just constantly hard work and not fun, I'm never going to be able to keep doing it, as I have no reason to. Thanks for any advice and for reading. So this is a fantastic post, okay? Let's go ahead and upvote it, even though it's 14 days old. So, this person kind of talks about a lot of really important things that we hear about a lot that we try to help people with. So this person kind of has this cycle where they say they motivate themselves to work really hard, and at the end of it, they feel tired, sad, and empty. And so they've heard this myth, right? The person who pushes themselves really hard and then it kind of crumbles apart, they've heard this myth. There are stories of people who enjoy the process. It's mythical. It's amazing. Like, to actually enjoy it, to not have to dig really deep and empty your gas tank, empty your mana pool to get something done. There are these people out there, these mythical creatures, these unicorns that actually enjoy doing work. And how do I become one of those people? So it's a fantastic question. So if you fall into this cycle of digging really deep and working really hard and then running out of steam, we got to understand how all this stuff works, okay? So let me just pull up this, and then we'll dig into this, okay? Does this resonate with y'all, chat? Sound familiar? Huh? Okay. So, we're going to talk to y'all a little bit about this cycle, okay? So this is the cycle. I need to do something. I dig deep. Find motivation. Okay? Work really hard. For like 2 days to 2 months. And then run out of steam. So if this is your problem, we have to start by understanding a couple of things, okay? The first is so this is something that, so when we think about motivation or action, there are 3 pieces that I want to share with y'all. One is intent, one is resistance, and one is action. Okay? So if you want to accomplish anything, you have to start with some degree of intent. And I think this is where this person is kind of running into issues. And then what happens is we get, as we have plans, right? I want to do something. Then we run across some kind of resistance. And then we sort of have to overcome that resistance, and then we kind of end up performing some sort of action. So let's say that I want to work out every day, but I don't feel like it, right? And so I run into some kind of resistance, and I can't really overcome this hump, and so I never end up going to the gym. And then if I can overcome the hump, then I can actually start to take action. And so if you guys kind of look at this curve, it's sort of like an activation energy curve from, chemistry and enzymatic reactions. And I think it follows motivation and actions and intent really well. So if I'm motivated, this is sort of like my diagram for motivation. You come in with some degree of intent. There's some kind of resistance that you have to overcome. And if you can overcome that, you'll end up engaging in the action. Okay? So the first thing that I want to point out is I don't think that this person finds motivation. So one of the ways that there are a couple of different things that you can do. So this is what some of our coaches work on, right? So one is, let's say this is going to the gym. And so one thing that we can do is, let's say when I go to the gym, I feel embarrassed because I'm out of shape and I feel like other people are judging me. So that is part of the resistance, right? So what I can do is, let's say I go talk to a therapist or something like that, or I begin to realize oh, actually, no one's paying attention to me. I don't have to worry about what they're thinking. Then what that does is that lowers my resistance. And so then it becomes easier to take the action. Does that make sense? So one of the ways that we can sort of improve our, not motivation really, but one way that we can take more action is by lowering our resistance. So a lot of times, if you look at, what holds us back from things, it's some kind of emotional resistance. So one piece of resistance is emotions. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. People will think I'm stupid. Another thing that we can do to sort of help things happen is when we kind of get to the action phase, there are different things that we can do, plan effectively, set goals, appropriate goal setting. So what do I mean by appropriate goal setting? So a lot of times when people think about goals, they think about where they want to go, not where they are. And so if I, let's take the case of someone who's fallen behind, right? So there's a lot of stuff in this about in Dr. K's guide. But if I've fallen behind and I have so much ground to make up for, any progress that I make is going to feel insufficient, right? So if I'm 25 years old and I'm living at home and I go and enroll in a class, I'm so far behind that enrolling in a class, even though it's absolutely the right thing to do, feels like it's insignificant in terms of accomplishing my goals, right? Because I have so much time to make up for. So there's a bizarre paradox that people who have fallen behind run into, which is that the more progress they make, the worse they feel about themselves emotionally because they've got like so much left to do. It's not, I'm doing all this stuff every day, but it's like nowhere near enough. And so they're focusing on the end goal instead of sort of like what they need to focus on today. So that's kind of like appropriate goal setting. So that's kind of in on the action side in my mind. And then there's the intent side. And so this is where when we think about intent, we think about, I sort of try to help people break things apart into what do people want? What do they value? What's their duty? What's the fourth one? Wants, values, and should. And what should they do? And so what I'm kind of getting from this person, and this happens to a lot of people, is when this person asks the question, how do I enjoy what I do? What I find for this person is that they feel like they should do something. So they're primarily motivated by what they should do, right? They need to put their lives together. And then what they do, they're not motivated. So motivation is an intrinsic desire for action, okay? That's the definition of motivation. So for example, like I'm motivated. There's like a natural inclination for me to do something. So right now I'm motivated to drink some water because I feel thirsty. So what this person does is use willpower, probably a combination of shoulds. So I should do this. This is important. I need to do this. It's good for me. It's not something I want to do or something that I'm motivated to do, but I'm going to use this plus willpower to overcome this. So, we have a mana bar up here, which I'm going to call willpower. And, let's say it starts off like pretty full. And the more resistance I have to overcome, the more I end up losing my willpower, right? So now I'm like 50% empty. And so what I'm noticing from this person is that they dig really deep and they work really hard for 2 months. They don't enjoy it at all, right? So there's no positive reinforcement. There's nothing there that's happening that's like filling up. So if you get positive reinforcement, it fills up your mana bar a little bit. It's like a mana pot, right? People say, hey man, good job. Or if you enjoy doing it, if you find it satisfying, if you find it, intellectually stimulating, you can kind of fill up your mana bar a little bit. Like today I'm exhausted. I don't feel like doing anything except for laying down. So how is it that I'm able to work? I'm using some amount of willpower, but I also genuinely enjoy doing this stuff, right? I really enjoy doing it. So that'll fill up my willpower. So what I see in a lot of people is that, they'll find these cycles of motivation where they dig really deep and they essentially exert willpower to do things that are not reinforcing. There's no positive reinforcement from it. And then eventually what happens is they run out of willpower. They've emptied their battery, and when they run out of willpower, they no longer engage in the action, and then they're kind of back to square one. Then all the effort that they put in falls apart, nothing gets done, their projects remain half finished, and then you're kind of back to square one, right? And then they're back to here. They're back to, oh, I should do this. Except this time, since they've failed, their resistance actually increases even more. Because now, let's say it used to be here, and now they're ashamed. And they failed. And they screwed up again. And so now when you try to do something, if you've failed and you've been stuck in this cycle for a long time, then there's this part of all these thoughts start, popping up in your head and making it harder for you to get intrinsically motivated. Because, oh my God, you've screwed this up so many times, it's going to be the same cycle over and over and over again. And so when you try to do something and your mind produces those kinds of thoughts, that has now increased your resistance. Okay? So this person's question, if we kind of go back to it, was, how do I find enjoyment in the process? So this is where what I want to do is I want to say it comes down to this. Okay? So there are a couple of different things. The first thing is like when you pick whatever it is that you're motivated, for lack of a better term, to do, what is actually like the motivation to engage in that? You know, are you doing this because you should? Or is there anything that you actually like enjoy? And what I'd really do is spend some time introspecting about like, you know, what are the tasks that you're doing and what's motivating you to do it? Are you doing a task because you should do it, because it's important to do, because you need to do it? Because if these are these three things are driving you, you're not going to enjoy it. These are should, it's important, I need to do it. I need to do laundry. I don't enjoy doing laundry. I never enjoy doing laundry. Like laundry is fucking boring to do, right? So the question of how to enjoy things is I would really reframe what your activity is. So let's like think about a student, right? So like I have to take calculus. Let's say you're taking calculus, and so then you're like, okay, it's a requirement, right? So you've got a couple of options here. You can just sort of say, it's going to suck, and I have to do it. And you just have to, you know, get through it. That's one option. I know it doesn't seem like a good one. But generally speaking, these things are kind of time limited. And the other thing is to really think about like, you know, pause for a second and try to like really appreciate the material. Like, do you care about calculus at all? Like, where does calculus come from? Like, if you really think about it, calculus is like really cool. So like calculus was invented. Well, you know, there's argument about who invented calculus or things like that. But let's just take Isaac Newton for a second, right? So maybe it was Leibniz who invented calculus first. Or maybe other, you know, in other cultures, people have discovered calculus. But I think it's really cool because if I remember correctly, and, you know, I'm rusty here on the history, but like Isaac Newton actually like developed his form of calculus to try to solve like a physics problem. And if you really think about it, like, you know, what are the things that calculus can be used for? It can be used to make like financial predictions. It can be used to send things to the moon. Calculus is a way of sort of, you know, understanding phenomenon in the natural world. And I think the more that you start to like really think about the material itself, like don't worry about the test. Don't worry about what you have to get through. Is there anything about this that you can start to enjoy? And when I talk to students, you know, who feel not motivated, what I really find is the most important thing to discover enjoyment in something is to really step away from what you should do or what you need to do, but really think about like, is there anything about this that I could actually enjoy? Like, is there anything about this that's like kind of cool? And what I really find is that if you can really take a step back and sort of think a little bit about like what it is that you're actually doing, then you oftentimes people will discover something that's pretty neat, right? Like if you're studying calculus, like it's pretty cool to think that when we send a rover to Mars, that like the people who are able to get a rover successfully onto Mars are employing calculus. Whatever subject it is that you want to learn, and I think I see this a lot with medical students too, where medical students are so concerned about grades and getting honors and stuff like that, like they seem to sometimes forget that studying medicine is not about getting grades. Like being in medical school is not about grades. It's like one day you may be trapped in an elevator with a pregnant lady, and you may need to figure out like, okay, do I need to deliver this baby or should I tell her to like not deliver it or like, what do I do? That knowledge has a very practical application to it. And so as we sort of go through that process of really like appreciating a task for itself, I think there's an important trick that we can use. So, you know, is it interesting in any way? And the last thing that I want to talk a little bit about is outcome orientation versus action orientation. Okay? So generally speaking, when I should do something, I'm concerned about the outcome. My mind is thinking about the result, the goal, right? And even if we look at this post for a second, what we see is that, you know, I'll have a 4.0 for the first 2 months of the semester. And so what this person seems to be focusing on is getting a 4.0. They're digging themselves every day when they sit down to study, right? What's in their mind is, I need a 4.0. I need a 4.0. I should have a 4.0. It's really important for me to do a really good job, and I need to have a 4.0 because I'm 25 and I'm leeching off my parents. So getting a 3.2 is not good enough. I need a 4.0. And as long as that's what's motivating them, That's an outcome orientation, and then you're not going to enjoy yourself. Because all you're thinking about is what you should do. And so if you want to start enjoying your actions, if you want to start finding enjoyment in things, take an action orientation, right? So it's like in meditation, we sort of learn this. So this is a cup of water and it's room temperature. A lot of people may think that room temperature water tastes not as good as cold water. But what I can do is just like notice the cup of water and I can kind of take a sip and I can be like upset. I can be like, I wish this was cold. Or how is room temperature water different? And so what I would really encourage y'all to do is to really focus on, the action itself. And the more that you focus on the action, the more that you start to like try to appreciate calculus. Like, this is pretty cool, right? Like, calculus is pretty neat. Like, no matter really what it is, like even, studying history or studying medicine or, like some people may think, oh, medicine is so cool because like then one day I'm going to save lives. But that also is an outcome orientation. Right? I'm going to be so great. It's going to be like ego. Everyone's going to respect me so much because I'm going to save lives. But instead, like medicine is cool because, it's like amazing that you have this like physical body that, interacts with things and that there's a mind and there's a body and there's like a lot of stuff to appreciate. But it's really hard to appreciate things as long as you are focusing on the outcome. Because if you're focusing on the outcome, it's not about appreciation. And I see this with like esports too. So this is the last example I'll give you guys, where I'll have players who, tilt easily in esports. And as we kind of talk about, tilting, like why do people tilt? It's because they're concerned about the outcome. And even the players who are sort of tilt resistant in a game, like they can like, even in a pub, they're the ones that kind of tell themselves like, okay, so I'm losing this game. I probably shouldn't be losing this game because this person fed, but maybe I can still like try to learn something, right? So they'll focus on the game itself instead of the outcome. And the more that they're able to focus on the game itself and sort of say like, okay, so this could be the comeback of the century. I don't know, like I might as well try something new. This game is lost, like whatever. Like, let me just try to have a good time. Let me try to learn something. And then those people don't tilt. And then the other really fascinating thing is those people tend to win more. So just to kind of summarize, if you're stuck in this cycle, okay, of, I need to work and digging really deep to find motivation, and then you work really hard for some amount of time, and then you run out of steam. The first thing to understand is that, when what you talk about motivation is not actually motivation. You have a limited amount of willpower, which you're exerting probably because you should do something that you don't enjoy doing. And then when you run out of that willpower, what's going to happen is you're going to stop acting. Right? So how do you fix this problem? What you really have to do is think about outcome orientations versus action orientations. And the more that you focus on what you should do, the more likely you are to run out of energy or feel tired and empty and still accomplish it. And instead, try to focus a little bit on the action, right? Is there anything about this that you can appreciate? Is there anything about this that you can enjoy? Forget about the test. Forget about the grade. Don't worry about that. This is an opportunity. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, even if you're in a calculus class, like calculus is hard to learn on your own. This is an opportunity for 3 months where there's someone who's actually dedicated to teaching you something, which then you will understand at the end of 3 months. And then you will understand like some of calculus for the rest of your life. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, even if you don't care about calculus, even if you don't think it's useful, it's like pretty neat that you can show up at this class for like 3 hours a week and do some homework and like probably spend at the end of the day, maybe 40, 50, 60 hours, and you can permanently acquire some degree of like proficiency in calculus. Like, that's not a bad deal. And so really focus on the action at hand. And the more that you're able to step away from what you should do in the outcomes, the more you'll start to appreciate and enjoy what you're working on. Okay? Questions? Questions? So this is a great question. What if you really want a 4.0? Wonderful question. So then the question becomes, why do you want a 4.0? Why do you want a 4.0? What does that mean? To get into grad school easier. Okay. So like, that's where, I know it sounds kind of weird, but I would say that the easiest way to get into grad school, I know what I'm going to say is kind of weird, is not to shoot for a 4.0. It's to really, really appreciate learning and to try to like learn as much as you can about a particular subject and ideally become something of an expert in it. And the more that you do that, the better your chances of getting into grad school are. So like, let's say I want to get into a, master's program for psychology, and I'm really interested in psychology. I think the best way to get into a master's program in psychology is not to actually shoot for a 4.0. It's to like really think about, okay, why do I want a master's degree in psychology? Like, what am I interested in? Well, I'm really interested in like the psychology of like loot boxes. So I would say learn everything you can about loot boxes and recognize that every day when you go to class, you could learn something that will help you understand the psychology of loot boxes better. You guys get that? Like, this is literally a place where people have collected all of this information and are showing up, and it is their job to teach you psychology. And all of that is going to fall under the umbrella of your goals. It's like a cheat code for figuring out psychology. That's what class is. School is like an OP, wiki for learning the subject that you're interested in. It's not something that you have to do. It's like people have collected all this information and are handing it to you on a silver platter so you don't have to Google search 1,000 things and figure out what the right resources are. Right? So, and this is, honestly, I'm telling you guys, I've worked with tons of medical students, and the ones that do really well, a lot of them do well, and they're gunners and they want 4.0s and they're ambitious, which is one way. But for the medical students who are struggling, the best thing that I've been able to offer them is like this perspective shift. Recognize that this is your chance to learn this stuff. And after you leave medical school, no one is going to teach you so there's a common thing in medical school where people like don't care about the rotations that, they're not interested in. So like my favorite example is the ortho bros. So these are like wannabe orthopedic surgeons, there's a very bro culture in orthopedic medicine. So they'll come to psychiatry and they're like, I'm not interested in this stuff. Like, this stuff is weak, man. It's for noobs. I'm going to like play with hammers and drills and replace knees and things like that. And so it's like they're not interested in it. And oftentimes like the ones that are pretty good will, I'll sort of explain to them that this is your last chance to learn psychiatry. Like, you don't think that you're going to have psychiatric patients. Like, there are going to be people with like depression and substance use and things like that are going to be in your OR, in your operating table. Like, and you're going to have to take care of them. Like, what do you do when there's someone who's pissed off because they're going through withdrawal and they don't sign the consent form for you to be able to operate? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to call a psychiatrist? What's going to be your consult question? Person won't sign consent form. That's not a psychiatric issue. But you better learn the skills of like how to talk to patients who are highly resistant. This is going to be your only chance to do it, because for the rest of your career, you're going to have to deal with disgruntled people. You got 1 month where maybe you can learn how to do some of this stuff. What do you think? And that's where it's like some of them are like, oh shit, this is actually very helpful. And so it's really interesting because it's bizarre, but what I tell people in medical school is you're going to have your whole career to learn the specialty of your choice. This is your last chance to learn all of the things that you're not going to spend your career learning how to do. Like, you don't need to spend medical school learning how to, replace hips. You're going to train for that for like 6 years. And then you're going to do that work day in and day out. And you're going to be awesome at it. You're going to replace people's hips. You're going to replace people's knees. They're going to be able to walk. You're going to make the world a better place. But if you're on an airplane and there's a pregnant lady and she's having cramps and someone asks, is there a doctor on the plane? And you show up and you don't get to say, I'm sorry, all I do is replace knees. Right? Like, you're the dude. If you're on vacation and something happens and someone's like, is there a doctor around? Like, you're the dude. Dudette, whatever. And so in that way, I encourage all y'all to think about whatever it is. And in medicine is a easy example because like it's clear that there's value to learning this stuff. But I think that that's true of basically anything, right? Like even stuff like architecture, like it's pretty cool to learn architecture. Like, I don't care about architecture, but I had some opportunities to learn some stuff about architecture, and I can tell you guys it's really neat. Like now when I travel to places, I understand a little bit about architecture. And so there's like these really simple principles which have helped me out a lot. One is that anytime there's a room that has light coming from two different directions, the room looks nicer. So even when I'm like looking at apartments to rent, I'll be like, how many different directions of light do I have? Oh, like this room looks cool. Oh, this apartment only has like light facing from this way. So maybe I don't want this one. Any kind of knowledge that you guys spend time learning, like if you really just try to learn it, and it's like pretty neat stuff, man. Like it can help you for the rest of your life. Like you're going to know this stuff. It's really neat. And so step away from that step away from that outcome orientation. If you say, I need a 4.0, what if I really want the 4.0? What do you want the 4.0? To get into grad school? Why do you want to go to grad school? To save lives, to do this, study this. So that's fine. But I think that if you're passionate about the subjects, if you can learn to appreciate the knowledge and let go of the 4.0, you'll paradoxically get better grades. So I got an award for having the highest GPA for this one program in medical school. And the funny thing is, like, I didn't even know what my grades were. Like, I didn't really care. Like, I was surprised. I was like, what? Like, I never even checked my grades. So it was like I had the highest GPA in the MD MPH program. So for like the MPH grades, that I was like at the top of the class, and I was like, what the fuck? And the reason, honestly, the reason that I think I was like, it was good is because I cared about public health. I was like, this is fascinating stuff. I want to understand biostatistics. I want to understand how to look at research studies. Like I was interested in complementary alternative medicine and evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine. And so I wanted to like learn how to really critically look at studies. And so when I went to class and they were like, this is how you read a study, everyone else in my class was like, oh my God, actually they were super passionate and stuff. It was a great cohort. But it turned out that like, I was like, oh, this is like really, really helpful. Like one day I'm going to be looking at papers evaluating Ayurvedic treatments, and I better learn this stuff. So how do you start to appreciate what you do? You let go of the outcome, right? Like how do you appreciate? You let go of outcomes. Think about the happiest moments in your life. And I would bet money that the happiest moments are the ones that you did not expect something. There was no outcome in your mind, right? If there's like a surprise birthday party, or like, I still remember opening up some loot boxes from Dota 2 Battle Pass from like 2 or 3 years ago. I was like, they'd been sitting in my inventory for 3 years. I didn't even know I had them. Right? Because I don't really care about cosmetics. And then like I opened up one and there's like some $600 sword in there for Wraith King. And it's like, wow, that's pretty neat. Right? It's like, okay. And then I didn't know what to do. So I sold it, and then I gifted a bunch of games to people with schizophrenia. So okay. It's like, so like think about the happiest moments in your life. Okay, seriously, like this is a great meditation practice. And try to find the nature of happiness. And I will bet you money that the more you expect something, the lower your happiness will be. And I encourage you to find, like, the next time that you feel purely happy, stop for a second and think about what did you expect about this situation? Think about shows that you've watched or games that you've played, right? And how much hype was there? What does hype do? It changes expectations. It makes people think about outcomes. Oh, this game is super amazing. If I play it, I will have lots of fun and I will be blown away. And the more that you think that, the less likely it is to blow you away. Should we stop expecting things? So that's a good question. So this is really, really tricky. So what I would say is you should stop attaching yourself to your expectations. So I think having like predictions about the future is like a good, healthy human thing to have. I need to have some kind of expectation that my car will run out of gas so that I can plan accordingly, right? So I'm not saying don't think about the future, but don't emotionally attach yourself to your expectations. If I go to the gym and if I get into shape and if I do all this stuff and then I ask out my crush, then they'll say yes. Right? So this is tricky. So let's think about attaching ourselves to expectations. I want to ask out my crush. I feel like they're not going to say yes. So what I'm going to do is invest a bunch of time and energy. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then they'll say yes. It's a great source of motivation. And it's a great way to get to disappointment. Right? And so this is what I've found for people who go that route. The more that I work with them and try to help them out, as they let go of the, we try to let go of the expectations. Like, it's great, dude. Like, if this is what gets you started, go for it. But let go, because you have no idea what your crush is going to say. And I'd say like 70% of them end up with someone else that they never expected. Right? Just in the process of bettering themselves and building their confidence and stuff like that, someone else comes along and they're sort of like, they're not kind of zeroing in on their crush anymore. And the ones that can let go of that expectation are the ones that can see, oh, there's like other stuff out there. There are other fish in the sea. And they actually end up in like really good, healthy relationships. I mean, case in point, I decided to become celibate and then met my wife. And so I let go of all expectations. And so all the crap that like back in, my freshman year of college, when I was like, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to find myself a girlfriend. It's going to be college. This is going to be great. We're going to party. We're going to meet chicks. It's going to be awesome. Join a fraternity, all that good stuff. And then all of those expectations, all of the shame, all of the outcome orientation, all of this, is she going to like me? Is she going to say yes? How do I get her to say yes? All that crap. I was like single and miserable for 2 years. Then I went to India. I was like, I'm going to become a monk. Screw that stuff. And I sort of let go. I was like, okay, fine. It's time to like let go of, that stuff. I'm going to be celibate. Don't need to worry about it. And then it made it like easier for me to like talk to women, because there's nothing riding on it, right? There's no expectation. There's no consequence. It's just, hey, you're a human being. I'm a human being. I'm going to treat you like a human being. You're going to treat me like a human being. And it turns out that if you start treating people like human beings instead of getting stuck in your head about how to get them to like you, that they actually like appreciate it and feel respected. And sometimes if you're lucky, they'll even be attracted to you. So what exactly do you mean by celibate? So I decided to become a monk. And as part of being a monk, I'm not allowed to have sex or have orgasms. So that's what I mean by being celibate. Okay. Should we move on to the next one, or are we talking about this? Can't even fly solo? Not if you're a monk, man. You're not supposed to anyway. At least the traditions that I was studying with. Well, actually, some of them, like the tantric traditions and stuff, you can have sex. Technically, in brahmacharya is the Sanskrit word that gets translated as celibacy, but it's technically not celibacy. What it technically is non-lustfulness. So your mind should be dwelling in the infinite instead of being preoccupied by sexual thoughts. Yeah, so someone's saying, what if your grades go to shit because you're just having a grand old time writing shit papers? So I know it sounds kind of weird, but like maybe that's okay. And if you're really enjoying writing papers, like maybe you'll be a successful author one day. And I'm not saying that you guys should just give in to, impulsiveness and things like that. Like, I'm not saying you should just do what you enjoy. I think that it's important to make sacrifices and use your willpower at times and do things that you should do. But if you're stuck in this cycle of like, I should do this, and that's the cycle, and all of your energy is dominated by should, and your actions are fueled by willpower, that's not sustainable. So like, even 50-50 is great. Like, I still do a lot of crap that I don't like to do. I mean, like half of my day is spent doing things that I don't enjoy doing. And I do them because I should do them or I need to do them, and I exert willpower. And on some days the willpower's there, and on some days the willpower isn't. but I also enjoy doing a lot of stuff too. And so it kind of balances itself out. Okay. Next question. Sorry, that one took a while. It's a great question, though. Physical reactions to emotion. I recently started trying to get a sense of my emotions, and I discovered that sadness shows in me like a strange knotting in my throat, anger like a pumping pain inside my head, and fear feels like chills in my chest. I wanted to know if other people in the AUG community experience physical sensations related to feelings. So this is a fantastic observation and is absolutely like an important thing to talk about. So a lot of times in our community, we have people who are alexithymic. So alexithymia is the inability to detect your internal emotional state. And people who are alexithymic tend to struggle a lot in life because a lot of our decision-making apparatus is influenced by emotion. But when we're alexithymic, we're actually blind to the activity of emotion within us. It doesn't mean that we don't experience emotion or that emotion is not active within us. It just means we're blind to its effects. So a lot of times, I'll work with people who will be like, they'll have like a very cognitive view of why they're stuck. So a good example of this is sort of like the incel community where they'll say like, oh, I'm single because women are, because I'm a low value male or whatever. So they'll construct this really, really complex, like intellectual cognitive structure. And underneath all that, what I've found time and time and time again is that there's some kind of like shame or fear that prevents them from actually like engaging with women in a healthy way. And it's not just the incel community. And this happens all the time with regular people. Like we're blinded to our emotions. So you may say like, okay, let's say I was thinking about asking for a raise, but I decided not to. And then if you ask the person, well, why didn't you ask for a raise? They'll come up with like a rationalization, right? We even have in our language this concept of rationalization, which is sort of like it's like a rational reason that isn't really the real reason you're doing something. So what's going on in cases of rationalization? So rationalization is a defense mechanism. And why do we have defense mechanisms? It's to protect us from negative emotion. So what we tend to see is that hyper-intellectual people oftentimes are employing a lot of rationalization. And the more rationalization you're employing, the more defended you are, the more internal emotion you've got that's actually controlling you. And so this is the tricky part with people who are alexithymic, is that people who are alexithymic don't experience things like shame and sadness and potentially fear. And instead, what that does is all of those emotions you're blind to them, but they're absolutely working on your brain, right? It's not like those parts of your brain are missing. So if you look at human beings who are, alexithymic, you'll actually see activity in the limbic system. Actually, I don't know if that's true. Let me just think about whether that's actually a scientific study I've looked at. I don't think I've actually seen that. But I would assume that, their emotional centers are still active based on my clinical work. So how do you become alexithymic? So this is where, there are 2 or 3 major causes of alexithymia that I see nowadays. The first is that if you're a man, we're generally speaking conditioned to not understand and experience emotions. So what that means is that like, if I'm a 14-year-old boy and I cry in school, I will be punished for that expression of emotion. And so then what I'll learn how to do is like bury that emotion, right? So I'm going to suppress it. I'm going to actively suppress it. And once I suppress it, I don't feel it anymore. And I'm going to feel kind of numb. So I don't feel particularly happy or sad or whatever. And that emotion is then going to start influencing my rational thought and like directing it in a particular way that I think is very logical, but people from the outside are going to realize is like completely illogical. But to me, it's going to make sense. So if you're the other main reason that people are alexithymic is because there is good evidence that things like video games, social media, these content aggregation sites like Reddit, TikTok, stuff like that, all of these websites, these like dopaminergic kind of things will suppress your negative emotional circuitry. So if I'm like feeling sad about myself and I go play a game of Dota, I may get frustrated in the game of Dota, but I'm not going to feel as sad about myself while I'm playing the game, like obviously, right? I may not enjoy the game very much, so that's something that's a very common experience of people who are alexithymic. They start to experience anhedonia, which is the lack of pleasure. But essentially, like browsing Reddit for 8 hours a day or binge watching something on, like Disney Plus, I may get some degree of enjoyment, but it's going to suppress my emotional circuitry. And generally speaking, when there's a part of our brain that gets like suppressed or deactivated for long periods of time or years, we start to become like less good at that, right? So if I don't get up and walk around, I'm going to be physically like not very coordinated. If I, taste the same food over and over and over again, I'm not going to have a very sophisticated palate. So it's really when human beings swim in a particular experience over and over and over again that we get competent at understanding that experience, and emotions are no different. So things like technology usage and social conditioning, and even like women can be conditioned to be alexithymic too. Like there are a lot of female patients that I've worked with that will grow up in households where they were punished for the expression of emotion, right? So their mom would tell them, if you cry, it makes us look bad. Stop crying. And so any kind of emotional expression was dealt with something like they were punished for it. And then they don't experience emotions. They learn how to suppress them, and then they become alexithymic. And so if you're alexithymic, what to do? So the cool thing, or bad thing, depending on how you look at it, is that our mind and our body are connected, right? So this is where like our psychology has physical manifestations. So there's good evidence, for example, that if I'm in a period of grief after losing a loved one, my immune system response to a vaccine gets dulled. So if you have people who get the flu vaccine and they've lost like a spouse, for example, they're more likely to get the flu because their immune system does not respond as well to the vaccine, and their immune system is generally speaking depressed. Depressed is not like psychologically depressed, it's like less functional. So there are a lot of connections between our mind and our body. So we know that, for example, there's a condition called irritable bowel syndrome, which is a gastrointestinal condition that causes diarrhea and constipation. It's really confusing. It's just your bowels are just all effed. And we know that as someone's mental health gets worse, as their anxiety gets worse, their irritable bowel syndrome gets worse as well. And we kind of understand that now. It's really cool. We're discovering a lot about science. And we know that there are things like the vagus nerve that travel from your brain down to your GI system and affect, your brain directly communicates with your GI system in a lot of different ways. We know that anxiety, can cause things like diarrhea. We know that conditions like hyperthyroidism will cause both increases in mental anxiety and increases in diarrhea. So this is a case where your thyroid hormone is artificially high and it has mental effects on you. So we kind of know that. We know that vitamin D deficiency is one of the causes of depression, right? So our mind and our body are connected, and there's overwhelming evidence to this. And so if you're alexithymic, one of the cool things is, especially for men, I've noticed this to be quite helpful, is that tuning into your bodily sensations is going to be the doorway to understanding your emotions. And even as men, you can kind of like think about this, right? Like when men communicate negative emotions, they'll use physical language. So when they talk about betrayal, like they won't say like, I feel betrayed and unlovable. They'll say, I feel like they stabbed, or they won't even say, I feel like I've been stabbed in the back. They'll say, so-and-so stabbed me in the back, right? I felt like it was a punch in the gut. And man, it felt like that person like kicked me in the nuts. How are you feeling today? Man, I feel like I got kicked in the nuts. And then like all the other dudes who are around like understand exactly what you mean, right? So our communication of emotions actually is through the medium of like physical metaphors. And there's a reason for that, is because generally speaking, like we can still be in tune with our bodies even if we've suppressed our emotions. So for this person who's sort of saying, oh, I feel like this feeling in my throat, like I feel tight in my throat, like what is that feeling? I'm not sure. So generally speaking, when I work with alexithymic men, what we'll try to do is focus on physical sensations to try to understand how that emotion, like what's the emotion you're experiencing. And it's amazing like how people can't come up with basic emotions. Basically, men understand frustration and anger for the most part. We're socially conditioned to experience those. Thankfully, a lot of social conditioning for men seems to be changing and, in my opinion, improving. But these are, sweeping generalizations, so take them with a huge chunk of salt. So what I'd say is that, first of all, it's very normal to experience physical sensations that correlate with the emotions that you're feeling. If you're alexithymic and you're trying to figure out how do I get more in touch with my emotions, what I'd recommend that you do is pay attention to physical sensations. So as you, go to the store, do your palms get sweaty? Do you feel weird burbling in your stomach? Like, you're going to experience all kinds of physical sensations all the time. And there's a really, really simple question you can ask yourself. And that's like, when someone goes to a place and experiences queasiness in their stomach and sweaty palms, what emotion do you imagine they're experiencing? And the cool thing about people who are alexithymic is that on a cognitive level, they can still make intellectual predictions about what emotion correlates with a sense of physical sensation. So what is the emotion that someone could be feeling if they've got tightness in their throat? Right? Like, and so if you're alexithymic, what I'd encourage you to do is, first of all, pay attention to your emotions. And you can sit with them. I'll teach you guys actually a quick meditative practice right now. We can teach you guys a meditative practice to like help with alexithymia. Notice your emotions and then ask yourself, what is someone who's experiencing this physical sensation? What emotions could they be experiencing? And then we also have resources on our Discord, like the feelings wheel and stuff like that. It's really cool to see a map of the different emotions you could be experiencing, and then just like circle the ones that apply. You're like, oh, maybe that's what I'm feeling. That's what I'm feeling. That's what I'm feeling. And literally what you're doing as you do this is you're training your brain, right? Your neurons are rewiring to be like more emotionally attuned. And when you do that for a while, you'll start to recognize your emotions. And since it's actually quite intuitive to experience and be aware of your emotions as a human being, I find that like 3 to 6 months, like you can get people who have, really, really good progress in terms of experiencing their emotions. And so then someone's asking, but then what? Okay, so here's the cool thing. Once you begin to understand your emotions, you begin to see how they're influencing a lot of different things in your life that you're stuck in. So like, for example, inability to find a romantic partner. As long as you're filled with anxiety and shame, then like it's going to be hard to find a romantic partner. And the cool thing is that there's good evidence that awareness of an emotion starts to reduce its effect, as well as like kind of make it, reduce its effect, as well as like metabolize that emotional energy. So if you look at a practice like psychotherapy, when we have people experiencing a bunch of emotion, how does that help them? Because like they've got all this emotional energy that's like bottled up and influencing their rational thought processes, influencing their behaviors. And as you become aware of the emotion, it starts to actually weaken and it feels like less powerful. And then it'll start controlling you less. And then your life will literally be less controlled by your anxiety, fear, and shame. And then your life improves. Okay? Does that make sense? So like it's weird, but just being aware of your emotions like makes you better. The other cool thing about being aware of your emotions is that then you can account for them, right? When I realize, oh my God, I'm anxious about asking for a raise because I'm afraid that my boss will feel like I'm greedy, that's when you kind of take a step back and you say, okay, it's okay for me to be afraid. I'm going to have that fear. It's going to sit in my chest. It's like I'm going to walk in and I'm going to do it anyway. But now that you know the fear is there, it's like, it's weird. And it's so hard to describe. But once you acknowledge and accept an emotion, its power over you diminishes greatly. It just doesn't control you as much. It's really bizarre. So like, we'll do this, especially in coach training. So when our coaches, so we've got a new batch of coaches, and they're like super anxious. And they're like, I feel unprepared. And then I'll be like, is it appropriate for you to feel unprepared? And they're like, kind of like, yeah. And then I'm like, yes, you are unprepared. You are inexperienced at this. You are not going to be good at this right away. And I want you to do it anyway. Try. They're actually pretty well prepared. You're going to feel inexperienced. It's okay to not feel competent before you go in, but you are adequately prepared. We acknowledge it, we sit with it, and they do fantastic. Because they go in without a false sense of confidence. Right? And it's like, it's okay. Like, I have faith in you. You haven't done it before, but I think you're going to do great. And I know that you're not even going to recognize it, but you'll see. And then like 2 weeks in, they're crushing it. They're doing so well. And like, they're like, yeah, I was paranoid. Like, I thought I was screwing up, but my client today said that it was so awesome and that like it made their week. And it's like, look at that. Do you feel like that's fair? And they're like, no, I still don't feel like I did anything. And I'm like, that's also a developmentally appropriate feeling. So learning to sit with your emotions is actually like really, really powerful. And it helps you like them not control you. The last video game analogy that I'll give you guys is it's like, here's what I'd say. So I don't know if you guys have played a video game where they're like invisible enemies, right? So like it's hard to fight an enemy that's invisible, but the second you detect it, then you can start doing something about it. And so for people who are alexithymic, they're getting owned right and left by like invisible opponents that are like controlling their behavior and they can't even start to grapple with it. And then they feel ashamed of themselves because they keep on screwing up and they're alone and they can't find a partner and they can't find a job and they can't do this and can't do that. And as you become aware of all of those emotions, then like you automatically start dealing with them in a healthier way. And then like your life just improves. It's bizarre. Right? Okay. My invisible subconscious is OP, please nerf. No, we do not want to nerf your subconscious. Here's why. Because your subconscious can work for you, right? So as you start to learn how to work on your subconscious, as you start to do things like meditate, as you become emotionally aware, as you start to like have a subconscious that, you cultivate in the right way, then it starts supporting you. Then you enter the realm of things like resilience, where even when things are objectively bad, that subconscious belief that you are a good person and you will survive and that you're going to do the best that you can, that supports you and actually it's absolutely OP, but we don't want to nerf it. We just want it working for us instead of against us. As you start to develop that subconscious confidence, that will start to affect you in very positive ways. So we want to harness that. We want to learn how to change it appropriately, right? We do that through awareness, through particular meditation techniques like yoga nidra. That's in the guides. Through some of these things like mantra that are a little bit more esoteric and are a little bit less scientifically based. So some of these other techniques and tools can be used to sort of like alter what's down there. What if that never happens? Okay, so someone says, what if that never happens? So let's think about this. Where does that thought in your head come from? Why does your... So it's an extreme point, right? So never. What if that never happens? Well, why don't you ask the question, what if that always happens? Or, what do I do when it inevitably happens? Right? So like even in that thought, what if that never happens? That thought is coming out of some kind of subconscious programming. Why is your default response the what if it never happens? Why is your default response so negative? That's because there's something down there, like you've learned some kind of lesson, there's some kind of emotion that has caused you to be skeptical and doubt good things happening. Right? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying notice your mind and the default response that it produces. Like literally I'm here talking to you about something and the first thought that pops into your head is, what if that never happens? So as we dig into that, we're going to learn that you have experiences that have caused you to doubt because there are things that you've counted on in your life that did not come to pass. And then your brain learns you can't count on this kind of stuff. And as you digest that emotion, that subconscious thought will change. Instead of your mind telling you, what if that never happens, and you never trying it, because that's what's going to happen, right? If your thought is, what if that never happens, you're not going to bother trying it. Instead, if you can alter your subconscious, instead the thought that will come out will be, that sounds pretty cool. It may not work, but let me give it a try. How would your life transform if instead of defaulting to doubt and uncertainty, You defaulted to let's give it a shot. I'm not saying have blind faith. I'm not saying don't approach it rationally. What I'm saying is your default response is let's give it a shot. If that's honestly how you felt on the inside, your life would be completely different. Wonderful questions. When you become emotionally aware, how long does it take to self-improve? It starts to happen slowly but surely, like right away. I mean, I'd say that as people work on emotional awareness, I'd say in 6 months to 1 year, a lot of them have very noticeable changes. But I think change is hard to notice and happens slowly, right? It's going to be tiny little interactions that start to aggregate over the course of time. So it'll be like a 1% shift on a daily basis. And due to compounding interest and atomic habits and all that good stuff, it's a beautiful point that the dude makes in Atomic Habits. What is it? 1% compounded interest on a daily basis yields an 800% change in like 1 or 2 years. So that's what it looks like. You're going to look at yourself in the mirror every day and you look the exact same as you did the day before, but look at a picture of yourself from 5 years ago and you're like, where did that person go? So change is difficult to notice. How do you start to change the thought? How do you start to make the switch? You start not by changing it, you start by noticing what it is. You start by becoming aware of what the thought you're making is. Awareness is the first step. You gotta detect the invisible opponent before you start dealing with them. So the first step is not change, the first step is awareness. Change is the second step. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Dr. K, why do I keep losing my stuff? When I moved out of my college dorm a couple months ago, I somehow lost the power cord to my piano keyboard, as well as several other important wires. Overall, this cost me a couple of $100. Then recently, wow, that's a lot of money, I lost a pair of headphones on a trip. I just recently misplaced my wallet. I clearly have a big issue with this and have since I was younger. My mother claims that I'm far too distracted and blames it on my phone. I spend too much time texting and listening to music while doing important things like moving out. She thinks that the problem is entirely in my mind, and if I focus harder and clear my mind, I won't forget stuff. This strikes me as a rather fallible solution, as you can still easily forget stuff even without distractions. She forgets her phone all the time. My inclination is that a more systems-based solution is required, like make lists or using color-coded bags, generally because I don't trust my mind that much. I'm wondering whether her solution is the right one, and if so, how can I implement it more effectively? It seems I seem to forget stuff like deadlines and papers occasionally too, so I would love to solve this. Okay. So this is a great point. So this person kind of forgets things, loses track of things. This person's mom is like, just focus harder, lol, noob. It's that easy, just focus harder. Okay? So let's start off the top. So if you have this problem, this could be a good reason to get evaluated for something like ADHD, right? So sometimes people with ADHD have these kinds of problems where they kind of like forget stuff. So remember that, all of us have variable attention, and what ADHD is, okay, let me just collect my thoughts for a second. So let's talk a little bit about ADHD and how to approach problems like this, okay? So, okay. So let's talk about ADHD for a second, okay? Attention and forgetting things. So I'm going to teach you guys 2 or 3 different principles today, okay? The first is, what is ADHD? So we have a capacity for attention. What is the capacity for attention? It's the ability to tell our mind to do one thing and for it to follow, right? So if you look at the capacity for attention, this is what it looks like across a population. Some people have super awesome attention. They can tell their mind to study for 6 hours and their mind can do it. Some people have very low levels of attention. This is what we kind of call ADHD, right? So their attention wavers so much that it impairs function. But the truth is that most people are like over here, where their attention's like, our attention is like pretty good, but it ain't perfect and it ain't terrible. So the first thing to understand about ADHD is that there are a couple of different theories here, but this is the one that I subscribe to, that in some ways the brain of an ADHD person may be different, like binary different from other people, but I tend to think about most psychiatric diagnoses as being along a spectrum. So if we look at like depression, right, or anxiety, like every brain has the capacity to worry. When your brain worries out of control or it crosses a particular threshold, that's when you get diagnosed with a disorder. When your attention span becomes so poor that it makes it difficult for you to do schoolwork and things like that, that's when you get diagnosed with ADHD. So the first thing to understand is that, attention has a spectrum, like a bell curve across a population, and that what we kind of think of as ADHD may be like anything this side of the bell curve. So this qualifies as ADHD. Okay? So if you guys have attentional problems like this, I think it's a good idea to potentially get evaluated. I mean, if you're losing hundreds of dollars worth of stuff, like you may want to get evaluated. I think ADHD is also tricky because it's it is the most underdiagnosed and overdiagnosed thing in psychiatry. And I know that sounds kind of weird. Like, how can something be underdiagnosed and overdiagnosed? Honestly, my experience as a clinician, this isn't based on data, is that a ton of people who don't have ADHD get diagnosed with ADHD, and a bunch of people who do have ADHD never get diagnosed, or they'll get diagnosed like late in adulthood. And it's miraculous when someone realizes like, oh my God, like I have ADHD, like I never realized. It's amazing. Like now that I'm on medication, I can just do things that other people are able to do. Like it's crazy that people are able to like come up with a to-do list and actually do it. It's revolutionary. There's also some evidence that, for example, ADHD diagnoses are more likely as you adjust the student-teacher ratio. So in places that have poor socioeconomic status, that have less teacher attention for students, those students are more likely to get diagnosed with ADHD. So ADHD can both be overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. It's kind of bizarre that way. So let's talk a little bit about attention and what's going on, okay? So that's the first thing. So the next thing to kind of think about is that Ayurveda, there's been a lot of like people talking about Vata and ADHD and things like that. So let's just talk for a second about Ayurveda. So Ayurveda basically agrees with this 100%. The thing is that what they call this axis is not attention. What they call it is Vata. And they say that if your Vata crosses this threshold, then you will manifest with things like ADHD or anxiety. It's a more kind of global thing. But it's not like Vatas are ADHD. It just means that people who have high levels of Vata like naturally sit over here. Okay. So people with Vata don't necessarily have ADHD. Not everyone with ADHD is necessarily predominantly a Vata. It gets a little bit more complicated, but that's kind of how Ayurveda also looks at things along a spectrum and basically says, if you're very high on the spectrum and you cross a particular threshold, it'll manifest as illness. So a Vata out of control will result in symptoms like ADHD, okay? So let's talk for a second about mom's hypothesis. So this person's mom's hypothesis is that using your cell phone is part of the reason that you're losing your things. And it turns out that that's probably true. So, technology usage increases Vata in Ayurveda, but let's forget about Ayurveda for a second. And it's probably true. So I found that my patients who have ADHD who are constantly getting pinged by their phones, their symptoms get worse. It makes it harder for them to concentrate. So if you're doing important work and you're constantly texting other people, chances are that you will forget things, okay? So this is where I think, being careful about your technology usage will absolutely help ADHD. Or forget about ADHD, even to help your attention span. So like if you decrease technology usage, what that'll do is like move you in this direction along the attention span, right? Because, and this is interesting because I don't know if you guys realize this, but technology is actually designed to take your attention away from whatever you're doing, right? So people in like UI, UX designers will talk about user engagement, right? So these like technology companies like Reddit and Facebook and Google and YouTube will they will figure out algorithms that will keep your attention on their thing, right? So YouTube does a very good job of figuring out like the right length of videos to keep people engaged and clicking on YouTube things. And as they do that, like more people watch ads and YouTube increases their revenue. So they're trying to increase user engagement. That's what we call it. That's what the technology folks call it. I'm not saying necessarily that it's nefarious, but if we literally think about what they're trying to do, technology is designed to take your attention away from some things and keep it focused on their particular thing. And there's a war, right, between Instagram and Facebook and Reddit and YouTube and Google, and everyone is competing for your attention. And so poor power cord can't compete against that kind of stuff. So I do really have found very consistently that people who use their phones while they're doing other tasks will forget things. Okay? So reducing technology usage, putting your phone away while you're trying to move or doing important things is probably a very, very, very good thing to do. And I suspect you will forget fewer things if you do that. Now let's talk about forgetting for a second. I forget stuff. So this is a very common misnomer. You may not be forgetting anything. So if we think about memory, so here's our brain, and when I try to recall something, okay, let's say I'm trying to recall something. What my brain does is it goes around here, it fishes over here, and hopefully I find the right thing, and I remember. You guys get that? And so if you don't remember where it is, you assume that you forgot something and you lost what was in here, that it was in here at one point, but that it got deleted. That's what it means to forget, right? Is to know something and to no longer know it. But the truth is that the reason that people with ADHD forget is because remember that in order to recall something, it has to get put in the first place. And this is where attention comes in. Because if your attention is low, it'll never get put in the first place. So the problem with this person is not that they forget, it's that their mind never attends and lays down the information in the first place. So people who have problems with forgetting things, I would say 75% of them are not actually problems with memory. So if you have a patient with dementia or like super old, like that's when you start to see memory problems late in life. I would say 75% of people who complain to me about forgetting, they have a problem with laying down the information and not attending to it in the first place. And the simplest way to understand that is studying, right? So if I'm studying for something and like I read a piece of paper, like a worksheet, and then I don't remember it, the problem is not that I learned it and then I forgot it. You don't forget it that quickly. The problem is that you weren't attending to the information properly in the first place. So most problems with young people that I see that forget things are not problems of memory, they're problems of attention. This is memory. Memory is like this part. Attention is getting things into your brain in the first place. And this is actually where 75% of the problems I see lie. So when this person says, I keep on forgetting things, I think it makes a lot of sense because it sounds like their attention is not focused. Your brain was not paying attention when you set down your phone. That's why you don't know where it is, because your brain was thinking about other things. It was not attending to where the phone goes, right? It wasn't attending to where the power cord is. And so this is where now we get to the question of, okay, so like what should this person do? So the first thing to understand is that this is not a problem of memory, this is a problem of attention. And so if it's a problem of attention, then what should I do about it? Number 1, reduce technology use. So like literally what I want you all to envision is this person has the power cord in their hand and they're about to put it away and they get a ping from their phone and they look at it. They set the cord down randomly and they're paying attention to their text message. So their mind is no longer attending to the power cord and then they forget where it is. Easy, okay? Reduce technology usage. Now this can be hard because once again, technology is designed to be addictive, right? So I'm not saying it's easy to put your phone away, but that's what I would recommend. The second thing is this person talks about developing a system, which works wonderfully for people with ADHD. So I'd recommend a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. If you guys are like really curious, I think he does a good job of like talking about developing a good system for workflow management. So what I want y'all to understand is that you've got a brain, right? This is a brain. And then you've got like, let's say like a to-do list. And all the things that you have to do, all of the tasks that you have to accomplish, all of the things that you have to deal with are kind of shared between these two things. And so if your brain is overwhelmed and you're starting to forget stuff or not pay attention, or you're, not accomplishing things, chances are it's because you've got too much on your brain. So one thing that you can do is offload stuff from your brain onto an external system. This is wonderful. Let me see if I can find. So this is the system that I use. Okay? So what I do is I take a piece of paper. This is the system that I use. Okay? So I take a piece of paper and I fold it into quarters. And then what I do is I put 4 different categories, and then I'll make like to-do lists for each one. This is just the system that works for me, okay? And what I tend to find is that when I can offload things on my brain, then what happens is that like my brain is not holding as much stuff, so my cognitive energy can devote itself to one task. And I don't know if this makes sense, but it's kind of like if I want to, put together a computer and I'm holding a lot of crap in my arms, it's hard for me to work with my hands and hold stuff at the same time. So cognitively, I find that the same is exactly true. That if your mind is holding a lot of stuff, it paralyzes you to action. So if we think about people who feel overwhelmed, I have so much to do, I can't get started. That's kind of weird if you really think about it. If you have so much to do, you'd think that that desperation and the need would push you because it's really important, last minute panic. It should it should make it easier to do things, right? You've got so much to do. But as it turns out, if if your mind is full of too many tasks, it's hard to devote all of your cognitive energy to any single one. It's like your RAM is occupied because you're opening up 10,000 windows and you can't actually you have no computing power left. So developing a system is a fantastic idea. Okay? So this is where, I'd recommend, so then the question becomes how do I develop the right system? Okay? So I'm going to give you guys a couple of tips for making to-do lists. Number 1, don't confuse a to-do list with a wish list. What do you guys notice about my to-do list? How many things does it have? It's got 6 things, right? The more your to-do list has on it, sometimes the harder it is to get a single thing done. Okay? So the second thing is your system has to be it has to be reliable. And this is going to take time. And what do I mean by a reliable system? So a lot of people will develop systems that their brain doesn't feel comfortable forgetting something because you can't, how can I say this? Your brain is going to hold on to something until you are subconsciously sure that the to-do list will get done. So the goal here is that make small to-do lists. Because here's what happens. If I make a gigantic to-do list and I never finish my to-do lists, what is my subconscious going to do? Is it going to actually put things down? It's not going to put anything down because it knows in the back of mind you're not going to you're going to lose the to-do list in 2 days. There's no point, and I have to remember it anyway. So you have to come up with a system that's reliable and it has to be successful. I know it's just be successful. So make a to-do list that is small. And I want y'all to understand that retraining your subconscious mind means consistently using a to-do list. So I'd say that your to-do list should be somewhere between 1 and 5 things. And the goal of your to-do list is not for it to be complete, not for it to do all of the important things, because that's the problem, right? When we think about making a to-do list, we think about things that are important, the things that have to get done. The goal of the to-do list, and this is the third tip, goal is to be completable. That's the goal of a to-do list. Because the more completable it is, the more your brain will feel comfortable offloading things. It becomes reliable. I can count on it. It's not a big deal. If it's on the list, it'll get done. Because the problem is when people make to-do lists, they're like, oh, I need to do all these things. And then like they're offloading their overwhelming stuff and the to-do list never gets done, so it doesn't become reliable. Your subconscious doesn't really care about it anymore. And then you have this pile of, this graveyard of to-do lists that never get done. So the goal of a to-do list is to get completable. And then people ask the question, but what about all the important things that I need to do? Well, what'll happen if I don't put them on a to-do list? Whatever the fuck is happening with them right now is what will continue to happen with them. Nothing will change. But make your to-do list completable. So kind of just to summarize. So this person was making a post about forgetting where they put things all the time. And they're wondering, is technology use have something to do with it? Absolutely. So attention span is along a spectrum. And if your attention span is very problematic and you're highly distractible, you may wind up with ADHD. I think it's a good idea to get evaluated. There are some things that can alter your attention span, and technology is at the top of the list. It is the biggest alteration of attention span that I see for the average person, okay? Remember also that technology is designed to take your attention away from things that you should be doing. That's like literally you have corporations spending billions of dollars employing engineers, psychologists, behavioral economists to keep your attention on that thing instead of what is important in your life. Okay? So reduce your technology usage. Practically, what does that mean? I think, okay, here's a quick tip for reducing your technology usage. What I'd recommend is keep your phone away from your person. I know phones are portable. I know you can take them with you everywhere. But what I tend to do is put my phone in a particular, like 1 or 2 locations, like sometimes in different rooms, sometimes near me. Today it should probably be near me because someone may call me. But I'm quite mindful of where I keep my phone. Because if it's around and within hand-reaching distance, my brain has already been wired to get that dopamine hit from opening up Reddit. Okay? So I just keep it in a separate room. Like when I walk into the house, I'll put the phone down in one location and I'll go about my business. And if things are like that important, I'll hear the phone ring. If not, then I'll go and I'll check my phone like every hour or 2 hours or whatever and see what's going on. And then I'll set it back down and I'll go about my day. Okay? Second thing to remember, forgetting is not the same as... So attention and memory are 2 different things. And oftentimes, this is the experience. What we experience is forgetting. But we may have never forgotten. We may not have forgotten anything. We may have never learned it in the first place. It could have not been laid down in the first place. And this is for young people, 75% of what I see. For patients with dementia and stuff, it's, that's when you actually forget, when you get older. And then the problem of, so how to deal with the problem of low attention. So reduce your technology use, put your phone away because, it's going to be addictive, and then develop a system. And when you're developing a system, remember the goal of developing a system is to take all of these things that are in your mind and like offload them into an external thing so you can free up cognitive RAM. And the more free your cognitive RAM is, the more you'll be able to do stuff. And you guys may have experienced this, which is like some days you wake up and it's like a magical day, okay? It's a magical day because you start off in the right way. You get one thing done and then you pound out the next thing and you pound out the next thing and you pound out the next thing and you get this momentum of task completion. How does that work cognitively? Is it like emotionally being satisfied? Sure, that's definitely a part of it. But it's also once you close one process, you have more RAM to deal with the other processes. And then you close the second process and you have more RAM to deal with the third, you have more RAM to deal with the fourth. And then suddenly it's like you're killing it. It's great. You're doing awesome. Right? So in terms of developing a system, what I'd recommend is don't confuse a to-do list with a wish list. Right? That happens way too easily where you put everything down there that you'd ever want to accomplish. And then the to-do list becomes overwhelming. And then you can't get started. So your to-do list needs to be a reliable system that your subconscious mind can like offload. Like you have to be able to trust in your system. Your subconscious has to know if it winds up on your to-do list, it's going to get done. So then the question becomes, how do we guarantee that it'll get done? And that's to keep your to-do list completable. That's the main goal. If it's not completable, it shouldn't go on the to-do list. And so for some people, I'd recommend something like, Your to-do list should include 1 to 5 tasks that take less than 2 minutes each. And there may be a part of you that says, but that's nothing. That's where we're going to start. And then you're going to finish your to-do list for the day. Give yourself a pat on the back. Good job. Right? Got it? Questions? A little bit about ADHD, attentional management, things like that. Dr. K, forgetting about the meditation for alexithymia. I haven't forgotten. We're going to do it at the end. What's on the right side of the attention span curve? Those are people who have naturally high, or not naturally, or potentially cultivated high focus. Right? So as you meditate, you'll move towards the right. So what if we have have to do a lot of things in a short span of time, per se, a deadline? I'd say do whatever you would normally do. Don't let your to-do list be polluted by all the crap you have to do. Let your to-do list be the things that you can be assured that you'll complete. And then manage the rest of the crap how you would anyway. So when I finish a task, do I put on more tasks? No. Excellent question. That is that to-do list. You get to have a complete to-do list. Slap that shit up on your wall. So one of my most inspiring things, I sometimes say I wish I had kept all my rejection letters, but I keep... Can I find it? Maybe not. So I keep all of my old to-do lists, and I keep all of my old notebooks. And sometimes when I'm feeling down on myself, I'll flip through that stuff. And it is one of the most inspiring things. It's like, wow, I really accomplished a lot. So I keep all of my to-do lists. Or I try to anyway. Does the Pomodoro technique work for ADHD people? I'd say for some. Has been my experience. Right? Someone's asking, psychiatrist is suggesting Strattera for ADHD. Thoughts? I would say trust your psychiatrist because they know your medical history. And if they're a good psychiatrist, talk to them. Strattera is an effective medication for ADHD. That is something I can say. I oftentimes will recommend Strattera because it's a non-stimulant, especially for adolescents. So prescribing stimulants to adolescents affects things like their weight and their growth and stuff like that. So I think it can be a useful medication. But I'd talk to your psychiatrist about it because they understand you way better than I do. Is medication necessary for ADHD? So this is the thing. This is the problem. So in Western medicine, we have a disease, and then we get these questions like, is ADHD necessary? Is medication necessary for ADHD? Whereas there's a human in there, right? There's individual variability. Is it necessary for ADHD? My answer would be no. But I'd say that depending on the person, it can be revolutionary. So I prescribe ADHD, medication for ADHD. I think I'm a bit rusty on ADHD studies, but I'm pretty sure that last time I checked, CBT for ADHD is as effective as medication. So cognitive training and work training and mental training can create about as good of an effect size as ADHD medication can. So I think behavioral interventions, which is pretty common in psychiatry. I'm not 100% sure about the ADHD figures though, like what percentage benefit you get. But I'd say that medication is an option that you should consider, right? So when thinking about, there's a whole lecture on this on the guide about general treatment principles for things like depression and anxiety. What are the general principles we should think about? Do you have the time? Do you have the energy? Do you have the availability to do behavioral training for ADHD? If the answer to those 3 questions is no, then I'd definitely consider medication. Do you want to combine both because they have a synergistic effect? Are you on other kinds of medications? Do you have a history of substance use? Do you have a history of abusing stimulants? All of those factors are really important. It's like, is it necessary? Well, it depends on all those factors. That's why, at least so far, you generally speaking need a doctor to prescribe you medicine, because prescribing medicine is not just about ADHD, which is sort of how our system is structured, right? We have diseases and we have treatments. We don't have people. That's part of what I like about Ayurveda, is because Ayurveda has a much stronger personal focus. So they don't view disease as being separate from a person. So the question of, does ADHD require a treatment doesn't make any sense in Ayurveda, because there can be no disease without a person. So personal factors have to factor in, but it's a completely valid question in Western science, which is kind of weird. We think about COVID as an independent entity, right? COVID has treatment. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that there are two different perspectives. Both are useful. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'd say. So, y'all should, if you are struggling with ADHD or you think you might have ADHD, I definitely recommend a professional evaluation. And if you guys are I think it's worth considering medication if you have a diagnosis of ADHD. Okay. Okay. Dr. K, will this be the job for the rest of your life? How am I supposed to know, man? Look, I got COVID 2 weeks ago. I could have died 2 weeks ago. So in that case, the answer would be yes. I guess that was my job for the rest of my life. Because it can be a terminal illness for a lot of people, right? And then, I have no idea what tomorrow's going to bring. It's going to be what I do for now. So, okay, let's do meditation. Then I think we've got, hold on, let me see if we've got, okay, let's do one more question. Or maybe we'll speed run these, okay? Because I think some of these we got to do more. Man, Chad, I decided to engage with you today. Having fun. Okay, my understanding of why you should meditate. I will start with the mind. All the things that are created because of it and what meditation is doing to it. All right, so anxiety, love, depression, empathy, attachment, sense of identity. All products of the mind, and all are always fluctuating because your mind is always thinking. And your mind is thinking because of everlasting change that is happening internal or external. Okay? I can get behind that for the most part. And so when you are in a state of meditation, the more time you spend in it, your sense of identity will change because of the change that you experience within that state. Okay, I think this needs to be explained a little bit further, but I can get behind that too. Everything you thought about yourself, who you are, doesn't exist. Why? Because you can exist without it. It's really something that cannot be explained, but try to think of a mind like a tool that will help you, like your senses, help you identify the world around you. And you yourself is the consciousness that is aware of it all and using it to guide through life. So the more that you are in that space, your sense of identity will change, which means that the way that you react on the things that are happening to you will be leveled, and you'll become more tolerant, overall a better human. I'm sorry if this sounds confusing, but I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of whoever is reading this and try to make sense of them. But I am aware that they would not get this all the way through, which is absolutely fine. Okay. So first of all, I really like posts like this on the subreddit. We get a lot of questions, which is great, but I like that, so I sometimes will post on the subreddit and I will respond to things. And one of my favorite things about the subreddit, one thing that makes me really proud of its existence, is that my responses are rarely the top voted comment. And that I think makes perfect sense, because I think there are a lot of people in our community who are very, very helpful and very insightful. And that's what I really love. So I love discussions like this because, it's topics that I like to talk about, and I love hearing other people's perspectives. So I really like that this person posted, because it's not just a question, right? Or specifically a question for me, but it's also just like a discussion that I'd love to hear different perspectives and stuff like that, because mine isn't necessarily correct. So here's what I fill in, because I think there are a couple of things missing here. So the first is that it sounds to me like this person's conclusion is not based on logic, but is based on experience. So what this person is, what I'd assume, is that they're saying, the reason you should meditate is because of this, and they're trying to explain it. And I think that they didn't come to that conclusion logically, they came to that conclusion experientially. So this is the first thing to understand about meditation. Meditation and the conclusions that come out of meditation are not logical. They're not sort of supposed to be logical. They're sort of subjective and experiential. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but that's a really, really important point. Now, in Western society, we tend to value logic and objectivity over subjectivity. But my experience as a psychiatrist has been that things can be logically correct or incorrect, but that doesn't get people to change. There's no logical doubt that smoking 2 packs of cigarettes is a mistake. You should stop. There's no... Logic is logic. Science is science, right? There's no doubt about that. And at the same time, appreciating people's subjective perspectives, I think, is oftentimes a lot more useful than relying on logic. So the first thing to understand is that, if you really want to understand the value of meditation, you should meditate, because then you'll see it, right? It's kind of like, why do you enjoy drinking a glass of water? Well, you got to drink a glass of water to see if you really enjoy it. But I think that this person is kind of spot on a couple of things, so I try to explain it a little bit better, or fill in a couple of things. One is that they're right that most of what we experience happens within the mind, right? Anxiety, love, hate, rejection, shame, whatever. Those are all things that exist within the mind. I think a key thing they're sort of leaving out is when you meditate, if you attain a state of dhyan, and there's a lot of detail about this in the guides, by the way, what happens is you exist outside of the mind. And so if you spend all of your time within the mind, that is what the mind gives you is going to shape your entire view of the world, yourself, and the universe, right? So when I'm depressed, I'm overly occupied in my mind. My mind is telling me all these negative thoughts about myself and things like that. And then my reality gets shaped by the conclusions within my mind. So as I step out of my mind, I start to experience things and I start to get data about myself, about the world, about the nature of things that is not coming from mental activity. And so as we spend more time in that non-mental state, in the no-mind state, our sense of identity begins to change. Because you may have all these ideas about yourself, like I am a man, I am a doctor, I'm a streamer, I'm Dr. K. Those are all identity fragments that come from the mind, right? But really, I'm none of those things. You can't biopsy me and find Dr. K. There's no such thing as Dr. K. It's an abstraction. It's an idea, right? It's like a shared delusion that we all kind of agree on, right? It's like a simplification for our understanding, but you cannot biopsy Dr. K. You can't x-ray it. There's no actual evidence that Dr. K is a real thing. It's just an idea. So a lot of our reality is constructed out of these ideas of the mind. So the more that we spend time outside of that mind, we begin to have experiences of self that transcend identity. And as we spend time outside of our mind, I think generally speaking, people start to move in the direction that this person was talking about. You tend to feel a little bit happier, you get less caught up in stuff, sometimes it's easier to focus, you get less distracted. And so as you spend time outside of your mind, it starts to grow and cultivate good things. Now, this is where when we say good things, what do we mean? So on the spiritual perspective, the reason that people meditate has nothing to do with anxiety or depression or anything like that, right? The reason to meditate is for moksha or enlightenment. That's the real goal of meditation, which most of society seems to have kind of stepped away from a little bit. But we also know from science that there are, measurable improvements in things like attention, anxiety, depression. We also know some of the neuroscience behind that. A lot of the stuff is in the guides. So there's a whole video about the neuroscience of depression where I talk about meditation and how depression works in your mind and stuff like that. So I think it's a great post because I think they're hitting on something. And as hopefully this person, meditates more, they'll be able to more clearly explain articulate what their experience is. Ignore logic. No, so the problem is that most human beings do ignore logic. That's the problem. right? Is that human beings are not actually, like, they don't behave rationally. Like, that's the problem. Is that is a truth. It's not a goal. It's just how we are. Can moksha be a desire as well as freedom from all desire? Seems paradoxical, because it is. No one who desires moksha will attain moksha. So the last desire that you have to let go of before you become enlightened is the desire for enlightenment. There's a bunch of good Zen paradoxes and stories about that, right? So I don't know if you guys know this, but the way I tell the story about Buddha's enlightenment is he tries really, really hard to become enlightened. And then at some point he actually says, screw this, I'm done. All this is crap. Forget it. I'm finished. I'm GGing out. Then he's not really sure what to do with himself, and he goes and he sits under a tree and he becomes enlightened. It's like, it's perfect. This person who's like, it's a paradox, you're right. It's a paradox. Trying to be, so let me ask y'all a question. Trying to be trying to be logical while avoiding rationalization is hard. You are correct. So how do you know whether you should trust your logic? You know, anyone have an answer? Our coaches know the answer to this. It's not intuition. Nope, you can't do logical analysis because you'll come up with your rationalization. Yeah, so y'all are right. Y'all are in the right vein. So when your mind exists without emotion, or you are fully aware of your emotional state and the impact of your emotional state on your rational thinking, and without ego, then you can trust your logical thinking. Right? So that's, as Raleigh's saying, so your rational thinking gets hijacked by your emotions. And all you have to do is watch a political discussion and you'll see this like so easy. Everyone's 100% convinced that the opposite side is logically, factually incorrect. And they're really, really emotional when they say it. Right? Hey, thanks for the subs, everyone. Wow, 17 months. 12 months. Appreciate it. And you know this, like just thinking about yourselves for a second. Right? Like when you're like after a breakup and you're like, oh my God, everything is so bad. And then like months later, you're like, wow, I was in a really bad headspace. That breakup was actually the best thing that happened to me. When you take a step back, right? And then you begin to realize, oh, my thought process was in the wrong space. And then like in those moments, your emotions and your ego is like kind of calm. So then your rational thinking will be correct. Patanjali calls this right knowledge and wrong knowledge. He says there are two kinds of knowledge. They're both knowledge. There's right knowledge and there's wrong knowledge. It's a beautiful way to describe it. Okay, last post. First day of studying Dr. K's guide. Most of what I was able to see on the first day is stuff that has already been explained on previous streams and webinars, but it's still very entertaining. I watched the first 4 to 5 vids on Ayurveda, depression, and meditation modules, but there's not much new. However, it's neatly organized, has a super clean script, and awesome visuals. It is better quality education content, and for old AUG fans, maybe the first day, maybe a refresher of the good old webinar days. That said, I'm thoroughly enjoying the guide, and I'm excited to get into the deep big boy stuff. Have a great day, y'all. Yeah, so, yeah, the webinar days were good. So far, what I appreciate most about it is that it takes concepts that I struggled learning over time watching his stream and presents them in a way that if I started learning them in this format, would have made the study much more productive. This is exactly the point. This will be a fantastic introduction for folks new to the community and great reference for those of us who have been fortunate to be here for a while. That's exactly why we built it. Honestly, like that's perfect. I love to hear that feedback. The goal of the guides is not to necessarily, I mean, there is new stuff. So the deeper into the guides that y'all go, the more stuff you'll get that is not explained on stream. But the early stuff is absolutely going to be like overlapping, right? And the challenge that we face is that on stream, we can't go deep into something because half of the people like aren't following along the whole way. But the beginning should be a good introduction. And that's exactly the point, is for those of y'all that are like, picking up a lot of stuff on stream, if you want to kind of get solidified and organized and like kind of like get it logically connected, that's really what the goal was. So I'm really happy to hear that. I'm also really happy to hear that people, that these ideas are not new for a lot of people, which is, part of, we try to share information in lots of different ways. And so, yeah. And someone saying, to be honest, I was kind of disappointed that I already know most of it, but I don't really struggle either. Yeah, so I can kind of sympathize with that. I kind of get where you're coming from in the sense that we have covered a lot of it. But I'm pretty sure that especially some of the later stuff, like, the videos on mantra, some of the videos on like, the different samskars and things like that, like some of that stuff is new. Like we haven't gone into detail with different herbs and dietary plans and stuff like that. Definitely there are a bunch of like worksheets and handouts and things like that we haven't offered on stream. But I'm not surprised that a lot of the concepts are like somewhat new. And I'm pretty sure, for example, that I haven't covered like panic disorder and some of those things. And some of the things that we cover in the guides are also like more complete. So we've done a couple videos on attachment theory, but I'm pretty sure the guide video on neuroscience of anxiety and attachment theory is like better and more complete. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, meditation. So I'm going to teach you guys a quick meditation for alexithymia. And it's actually like really simple. It's just, the next time you're in a situation where, you're feeling physically uncomfortable, if you can, take a step back somewhere, try to sit down, close your eyes, and start off by like noticing the feeling. So I don't know if you guys can do this, but we're going to try with a memory. So I want y'all to think about something that you did that is emotionally like activating. So think about something that you did was super cringe. So cringe is one of the easiest emotions to recall or like bring up and experience in the present. Y'all can think about, something that happened to you recently. It doesn't have to be a negative emotion even, but I think negative emotions are kind of easier and are more of what people want to work with. And so close your eyes for a second and try to just recall a very cringe moment. So as I think about a cringe moment, I notice a tendency to want to clench, for lack of a better term. I want to like pull away. And so notice those sensations. The desire to retreat, desire to kind of pull in. And depending on whatever you're feeling, whether it's something in your stomach or something in your throat or like a tightness in your chest, what I want y'all to do is breathe into the space that has the physical sensation. So as we take a deep breath in, I want y'all to imagine that air entering your nose, feel that cool air entering your nose, and you'll sort of notice that tightness, that tension, maybe heat in your chest. And feel that air kind of going in there and expanding it out. So if you feel tightness in your throat, you can kind of feel that tightness wanting to clamp down as you breathe in. It expands it out. And then don't resist it. Let the emotion kind of bounce back. Let the physical sensation kind of bounce back. Let it recontract. Let it relax back. And breathe out. Now breathe in again and breathe in once again. Breathe into the center of that physical emotion, that sensation. And feel as that cool air kind of goes in and shakes it apart, freshens it up a little bit, and then let the breath leave and relaxation come with it. Sometimes as you do this practice, you may notice a bodily desire to do something like cough or, loosen a muscle or swallow. So go ahead and let your body do those kinds of things if it feels like doing it. And continue breathing into whatever the physical sensation is. Expand it out and let it relax, let it come back. Let the sensation be there. And now go ahead and slowly come back. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but that is like emotional digestion. So I've had some patients, I can think of a couple that have had really bad trauma, that anytime we try to cognitively work on their trauma, it gets way overwhelming. So what we'll do is something that's deeply physical. As we kind of get close to their trauma, they'll start to feel physical sensations. And what we'll do is pause right there and breathe into that sensation and then breathe out of it. And it's almost like they're bringing in like life and some kind of like health or healing or something. It's weird. And then they're breathing out that negative energy and that tension and that toxicity. And what we tend to find, so remember that as you mentally feel a certain way, it'll come with a physical sensation. As I become mentally nervous, I'll have butterflies in my stomach. And it turns out that most things in the body-mind connection, or just about everything, is a two-way street. So the cool thing is if you can reduce the bodily sensation, chances are you'll experience a mental benefit as well. And we kind of know this because we'll have, people will breathe into a paper bag while they're being anxious and stuff like that. So there are lots of physiological mechanisms at play, most of which we don't understand, but we do I'm pretty confident that the body-mind connection is a two-way street. So you can work on that emotion and sort of metabolize it a little bit at a time. There may be a lot of stuff there to metabolize, but the more you do this, I'd say most clinical benefits from meditative practice require 20 minutes of practice 3 days a week for 8 weeks. So as you do this practice more regularly, you'll start to see neuroscience changes. You may start to even see a clinical benefit. It's not necessarily a treatment, but that's what the studies show, is that you do see clinical improvements. So we don't really know how that works. But I'd recommend y'all do this practice. And then the second piece of this, if you're a little bit alexithymic, that's how to sit with your emotions. People ask the question, how do I sit with emotions? That's one way. Breathe into it, breathe out of it. And the other thing is that if you feel those physical sensations, you can kind of ask yourself, what emotion would someone who feels those things be experiencing? And then ask yourself, is that what I'm experiencing? So it's a really simple practice that can help you get in touch with your emotions a little bit, be able to tolerate them a little bit, be able to tolerate and ease up some of those physical sensations. Okay. Is there a vlog? Yeah. So there'll be, I think there'll be a VOD on Twitch, which gets automatically taken down after some point. And then hopefully pieces of this will get uploaded over YouTube. After I recognize, breathe into it and breathe out of it. That's it. Start with awareness. You guys all make it sound like awareness is like, then you got to do something about it. You would be amazed at what awareness can accomplish. The more extreme people in the meditative traditions will actually say, and I don't know that I entirely disagree with them, awareness is actually enough. You don't need to do anything. All you need to do is be aware. I think it's a touch extreme to have that view. I think it helps to do something. But start with awareness. Okay? All right, who are we rating? When is the best time of the day to meditate? Suryodaya and Suryast. Brahma Murta, dawn and dusk. Best times to meditate. Did you do the ED thing? Oh, great. Hey. Let's talk about erectile dysfunction. I saw this paper too. Okay, let's take a look at this, okay? So we talked about COVID. So this is why y'all should get vaccinated, okay? I mean, everyone should get vaccinated so you don't, die and stress out the system and have cognitive problems. But a pilot study described the histopathological features of penile tissue of patients who recovered from symptomatic COVID-19 infection and subsequently developed erectile dysfunction. Penile tissue was collected from patients undergoing surgery for penile prostheses for severe ED. So this is a small sample size. So 2 men with a history of COVID-19 infection and 2 men with no history of infection. So it's a histopathological study. So conclusions, our study is the first to demonstrate the presence of COVID-19 virus in the penis long after the initial infection in humans. Our results also suggest that widespread endothelial cell dysfunction from COVID-19 infection can contribute to ED. What I was really hoping for, I wonder if I was hoping for epidemiology, because I saw a statistic that 35.7%, if I'm remembering correctly, of men who have COVID have erectile dysfunction of some sort. So be careful. That's cool. That there's that's neat. That's a cool paper. It looks at the mechanism, the pathophysiology through which it happens. Is that peer reviewed? Yeah, it looks like it. It's the World Journal of Men's Health. I don't know what the impact factor is, but I mean, it seems good. Right? They're pretty good. They said they looked at 4 people in its histopathological features. But anyway, so who are you rating, chat? Oh, there are 3 papers. Oh, sweet. Okay, hold on. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Thank you guys very much for telling me. Okay. So let's take a look at this. Mask up to keep it up. Preliminary evidence of the association between erectile dysfunction and COVID-19. Okay, this is the Journal of Andrology. I don't know how good of a journal it is, but okay. Results. 100 subjects were included in the analysis, 25 COVID positive, 75 COVID negative. The prevalence of ED was significantly higher in the COVID group. So look at this, 28% in the COVID group versus 9% in the average population. That's a 3-fold risk, chat. Logistic regression models confirmed a significant effect of COVID-19 on the development of ED, independent of other variables affecting erectile dysfunction. That's good. So it's good. They did a logistical regression analysis. Odds ratio is 5.66. That's high, man. Wide confidence interval, though, so it looks like it's a small sample size. Likewise, subjects with ED were more likely to have COVID-19. So this is 28%, dude. It's a small sample size, right? Only 25 patients. So thanks a lot, Jake, for finding these papers. Appreciate it. Who are you? What? That was confusing. Oh God, histopathology and ultrastructural findings of fatal COVID-19 infections of the testis. This is probably something that we don't need to look at. Yeah, that's let's not go quite into fear mongering. So here's the point. So I don't know if you guys caught that, but the COVID-19 virus affects particular receptors, and those receptors are found in like all different parts of your body, like your kidneys and stuff like that. So it seems like COVID affects a lot of different organs. And I think when people think about COVID, they're like, they mostly think about ICUs and ventilators and stuff like that. The really scary thing about the virus is that, can have like cognitive complications for weeks or months or potentially permanently, erectile dysfunction. There's a rising incidence of people developing diabetes from COVID. So either it destroys your pancreatic beta cells or causes some kind of like immune cross reaction. I've heard case reports about that. So it's like scary stuff. The good news is that we don't really know exactly how vaccine will affect these kinds of things, but I would say that based on our general understanding of medicine, I would expect more severe infections to be more debilitating, because like that's usually how infections work in human bodies. And so if you have a milder breakthrough case of COVID, the likelihood that, your junk continues to work is pretty good. So who are we rating, chat? S-Fand? Okay. Ryan Higa? Raid Shadow Legends. Did we raid Trihex last time? I think there's a watch party on Discord. We'll raid Dan's Gaming. All right, send Dan's Gaming some love. Hope you all enjoy the guide. Hopefully it's helpful. And we'll see you guys on Monday.